Hi, and welcome to another edition of Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry De Silva. We did a show a while back that we had quite a bit of fun doing with some past guests, and we decided to do a part two called Hollywood or Bust Part 2. And basically it's kind of reminiscences, stories of Hollywood stars of yesteryear. And as a matter of fact, we even have some that are folks that are still around to tell us these stories, or three guests who have been with the show on multiple occasions. Well, we'll start off with the author of Joy Lansing, A Body to Die For, a love story by Alexis Hunter. Our friend Alexis is joining us via phone from California. Alexis, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Larry. I'm so thrilled to be back with you. This is always fun.
Good to have you here. Our second panelist, she was with us not long ago, Barbara Sternig. She is an author, also a journalist, a former senior reporter for the National Enquirer. She worked with for over 20 years. Barbara's book, most recently, Celebrity Secrets of a National Enquirer Reporting, Further Adventures on the Hollywood Beat. Barbara, welcome back.
Thank you, Larry. Very happy to be with you again. So fun to be with Alexis, too.
And our third panelist, again, a returning semi-regular, Robert J. Teitelbaum. Robert, author as well as now publisher, Teitelbaum Publishing. His most recent book that he co-wrote with his wife, Carol, Hiding in Plain Sight. And that is a prequel to his well-received book, Frogs and Snails and Mobster Tales, about years growing up with his parents working basically for the mob. And this book, Hiding in Plain Sight, is a personal window into organized crime in the 1920s through the 1950s. And Robert, welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Larry. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, we will start off with Ms. Sternig, something that I know I made a mental note when you joined us the last time. We have a photo of you and a gentleman that passed away a couple of years ago, one of the James Bond crew, Roger Moore, not Robert Moore, Roger Moore, Sir Roger Moore, I'll have you know.
Sir Roger Moore, and, the late and great.
Yeah, now you got to know him a little bit. Tell us about an encounter or a story you have to share about Roger.
Yes. Oh, Roger is a great guy, was a great guy. I really miss him. He and I met at a party one time at a mutual friend's home, and we kind of hit it off. And so I said, well, gosh, why don't we do a little interview together? So he said, well, that would just be fantastic. So about, a couple of weeks later, I came up to his beautiful home in Beverly Hills. He was a little bit late because he was still out on the tennis court when I arrived. But so I was entertained by his wife at the time, Louisa. And finally Roger came in and we had a terrific sit-down interview. And it turned out later that Roger lived in a house. It was a rented house because I don't think they usually lived in Los Angeles, but they had rented this house. And it turns out it was owned by this friend of mine. And I said to him one time, gosh, I never forget that terrific interview that I had with Roger up at his house in Beverly Hills. Oh, you mean the one on so-and-so drive? I said, yeah, it was on that. He said, well, what was the number? And I said, he said the number. I said the number. That was his house. And I described the big, giant grand piano and right as you entered the living room and everything. And so he knew Roger quite well, too. It's just one more example of what a very small, big town Hollywood is. It's just everybody seems to have a connection with everybody else, and I think anybody that's worked in the business here in any kind of phase of the business, whether it's in journalism or whether it's on the screen or behind the scenes, we all have about 1 degree of separation from each other. And I think Alexis and I found that too when we had a mutual friend that we'd both known for a long time. But yeah, Roger was a terrific guy. I felt really sad when he passed away because he was one of the true gentlemen. There weren't that many of them that really, really were gents, and he was one of them.
And a guy that, growing up, of course, I'm sure many of us remember, he was on that great TV series called The Saint, which was produced in England.
Yes.
And then there was one that very underrated because it was only on, I think, 1 or 2 years. He did a show with Tony Curtis that was filmed in Britain, and actually I came to find out Roger was like an executive producer, although it was not credited as such on the show, I think with Sir Lou Grade at the time, and it was called The Persuaders, and the show here it bombed. It was on ABC, and it ran, I think it was up against Mission Impossible on Saturday nights, but in Europe and the rest of the world, it's still seen today, and the only reason they didn't do another season of it was because then he got the call to be James Bond, and of course, as they say, the rest is history. But,
yes, the rest is. Roger, interesting thing about Roger, Roger did not consider himself to be a smart man. That was something he talked about, and I found that so strange because I always feel that actors have to really have a certain extra intelligence to step into these roles, and obviously what you just said proves that he was no dumb bunny. He knew what he was doing, and he knew how to get behind the scenes and get stuff done too.
Absolutely. All right, Alexis, we turn to you. First of all, I want to show a photo. Alexis received an award not too long ago. Congratulations. I was unaware until I knew you were going to be on the show. Tell us, what was the award? I assume it was for the book. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was for the book, and I'm so excited and so honored to have received it. It was the Irwin Award, which is it's the industry appreciation of writers in the news. And I received it for the best entertainment book of the year, and I am totally blown away. I'm so happy about it. Thank you.
Congratulations. Now, a gentleman that is still with us, thank goodness, at least as we tape, and we have a shot of him, and I didn't know that you knew him, Jesus Christ, or in this case, I should say Jesus Christ Superstar, Ted Neely. You and him, I guess, ran into each other at an event, and tell us, how do you know Ted Neely?
Oh, God, years and years ago when I was just a kid, and Jesus Christ Superstar was playing in Hollywood. A friend of mine knew him, and we just sort of hung out for the evening. So I met him years ago, and I happened to have been doing the Hollywood Collectible Show in L.A., and he was there with Yvonne Elliman, and I was able to chat with him, and what a wonderful guy he is. He's so warm, and he really takes it seriously.
I got to see him a couple of years ago in a road version of Jesus Christ Superstar here at the Hartford Bushnell Theater in Hartford, Connecticut. And again, what was they were saying? Well, he's twice as old as Jesus ever lived. And but I'll tell you, it's amazing. Once he gets in the whole garb, he is. That is the role. He's like Yul Brynner in The King and I. He'll do it until the day comes.
Right.
And Alexis and I wanted to just say, Alexis and I were both at that event together, and I had to go over and speak with Teddy too, because it just so happened that when I was a young reporter working for Rona Barrett, I was at the very, very first performance of Jesus Christ Superstar when it opened at the Universal Amphitheater here in Hollywood. Even before they had walls around the theater, it was like an open-air theater with no back on the stage, and he remembered that opening night so well. And so did I, because it was my birthday when that opening happened. But yes, Alexis and I both thought, gosh, what a neat thing to see him again in this new age in the world. And still going strong. Absolutely.
Studio 411 is the name of the program, and we are doing a show that kind of a part two on an episode we did a while back called Hollywood or Bust, stories about some still current as well as stars of yesteryear. Alexis Hunter, Barbara Sternig, and Robert J. Teitelbaum, joining us for the hour. As we turn to Robert, Robert has worked in the business for many, many years before he became a full-time author, and also speaking out about abuse as it pertains to males primarily and females in this country. But for many years, Robert was a casting director, and he is just loaded for bear with stories. And you have a story about the film La Bamba and/or the director, who was a gentleman by the name of Luis Valdez.
Absolutely. Taylor Hackford brought me in to interview with Luis, and Luis was questioning me, and he finally asked me, he said, Robert, why would I hire you when there are so many Spanish-American casting directors that I can use? And I said, because I know what Mexicans look like. And he said, tell me. He thought about it for a minute, and then he said, tell me what's the difference between a Mexican-American that lives in East LA and one that lives in Champa San Cristobal. And I said, skin color. And he said, very interesting. Why? I said, difference of diet. And he said, okay, we're going out to dinner every Thursday night, and we did during the whole production of La Bamba.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, we got a still of La Bamba. Those of you who don't remember, Lou Diamond Phillips was the star of that movie, and a great movie soundtrack. Brian Setzer, Los Lobos got their big start in that. And,
You bet.
Yeah, good stuff. And now, did you cast that movie as well in terms of the leads and the supporting players?
No, usually when I step in, there was usually 10 to 15 of the actors already brought in by the producers and directors. I brought in all the other cast, all the extras, all the stunts and things like that.
There you go. All right, we turn slowly. He turned over to Alexis. Alexis. There was a guy that was in the book, I don't think we talked about the last time you were on, a guy named Bob Slatzer. And turns out, I guess he claims to have had a romance with the late Marilyn Monroe. What can you shed on that tale?
Well, that's an interesting tale, if nothing else.
Not Marilyn's tale, Bob's tale. Okay.
Bob's tale. Robert Slatzer was a very interesting guy. He was the director on the film Big Book, where I met Joy, and he imbibed quite a bit. So it was hard to know very much about him, but he did say, and he did write a book about the fact that he had been married to Marilyn Monroe, and I have no idea if it's true. All I know is that when Joy died, he was one of the pallbearers, and because of him writing that story, there were death threats, and they had to have the FBI and tons of police had to be at Joy's funeral just to protect him. It was crazy, absolutely crazy.
I do remember the book. So there was a book by Mr. Slatzer. I didn't know whether that was the same gentleman that had written the book, but so he did get a book deal about it. So he did something. Yeah. I also wanted to mention too, if we can pull up the cover of Alexis's book on her late friend Joy Lansing. Again, I just want the public to get a look at this lovely lady. So when you hear her mention Joy, she's talking about the late actress Joy Lansing again. So, I don't think I've ever asked you. It's amazing that she's been going almost 50 years. I'm sure there are days where you just shake your head and say, how can it be?
You're absolutely right. It seems like yesterday. I mean, my memories of her are so vivid, and I can't believe all these years have passed because it's still very much fresh in my mind.
Absolutely. Barbara, tell us one thing I know we didn't talk about in your past appearance. You knew a gentleman that spanned the decades. He was kind of like a precursor to a Dick Clark, very involved with a lot of productions. A gentleman by the name of Ralph Edwards, who a lot of folks might remember from This Is Your Life. And you worked with Ralph.
Yes, I did. And Ralph was just an amazing person. He was so generous. After I left Rona, I had several meetings with Ralph, and he actually got me together with a guy by the name of Bob Stivers. And Ralph was very instrumental in the actual creation of a show called the People's Choice Awards. And knowing that I had a book full of contacts after leaving Rona Barrett, Ralph got me together with Bob and got me onto the production team for the very first People's Choice Awards. And that was really, I felt so edified by that because I had a chance to use all of the contacts that I'd made over the last 4 or 5 years when I was writing Rona's report on television. And because I was able to get together with a lot of the PRs and arrange for a lot of the stars to come on that first show, which nobody had ever heard of and didn't know what it was going to be like. But we managed to get a lot of very big stars onto that show, including Bob Hope, and let me just think some of the other ones. I think Jimmy Stewart was on the show, and it turned into sort of a phenomenon and became a yearly event. I'm not even sure if it's still on, but it went for many, many years. And Ralph actually had a radio show very, very early, probably in the 30s or 40s, called Truth or Consequences. It was a quiz show. And how I actually met him was there was a town in New Mexico that loved that show so much that they renamed their town Truth or Consequences. Truth or Consequences, New Mexico still exists. And every single year, Ralph used to have a press tour to go down there, and he put on a whole very fun weekend, and a lot of stars came along, and they did a big show on the high school there in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and they had a big parade, and Ralph was at the top of the parade, and we all got to participate in this very fun thing. But people don't realize what a generous, beautiful guy he was. Maybe they do, because This Is Your Life was such a warm-hearted thing, and I think it really touched a lot of people to see about people's lives and all of the close relationships that they had and how this had influenced their lives of very famous people. So, yeah, do you think anybody else out there remembers Ralph Edwards?
I hope so. I know that, the first incarnation, we have a shot of Ralph Edwards, by the way. The first incarnation, it was kind of like Dragnet. It was in the 50s, maybe early 60s, and then they brought it back a little later on in the 70s, and it ran for another 10 or so years. But yeah, I remember Truth or Consequences, but of course, as you said, later on, the version that ran for many, many years with Bob Barker, who was the host.
Exactly.
Actually, when he left that show, it was when he took over The Price is Right, and of course the rest there is history, because that show ran for many, many years. But yeah, Ralph Edwards. Again, I like talking about people like that, because as you said, a lot of times people tend to forget some of those folks, and really someone that I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the Television Hall of Fame. I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but I'm sure he is for sure. Studio 411, the name of the program. We're talking Hollywood or Bust, Part 2, with our friends Alexis Hunter joining us from California, Barbara Sternig as well from the West Coast, and from, points unknown today, traveling light and saying yes, ma'am, to everything his wife Carol says, Robert J. Teitelbaum. Right, Robert?
That's right. Actually, I'm in Las Vegas right now.
Las Vegas. Oh, my goodness. We're all jealous. Okay, so the ladies will get a convertible, and I'll hop on a plane. There you go. We got a plan. All right, Robert, back to you now. You have some stories or story to tell. Moonlighting, Bruce Willis, maybe a little Demi Moore? Or a lot of Demi Moore, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I did the second 2 years of Moonlighting, and I was brought on for the look of the show, because the first year just didn't cut it, but the second two really were a lot of fun, because I was able to bring them a lot of characters. And one episode towards the end of the show, end of the third season, was basically Bruce was in the elevator with two girls. I had an exclusive deal with Irina Kamal at Playboy Modeling. All the girls needed to get their SAG cards, so they would work for me for 10 days, caused no trouble. I paid them a lot of money, and if they didn't cause any trouble, I would Taft-Hartley them. And I Taft-Hartley all the girls because I had that exclusive deal with Irina. But I didn't like I thought, because I knew that Demi had just finished a movie, a big movie, and I wanted to see if I could put her on. And I asked Bruce. He put her instantly, gave me a cell phone and called her and put me on. I had known her from Universal from many years before. And I asked her if she would do an elevator scene with Bruce, and she said, absolutely. I said, I can't pay you very much. I can just give you a plain contract, a day player contract. She said, I'd do it for nothing. I said, no, we have to pay you, and she did. She's in the elevator and with Bruce and with the 2 Playboy models, and about 6 or 7 other extras were in the background. And she made them look, she looked better than the models at Playboy. She looked absolutely drop-dead gorgeous.
There you go.
And she did this for me. When she was done, she hugged me and thanked me for one of the movies that she did at Universal, because there were some problems. And I was very pleased to do that. ABC Picture Makers went nuts. They couldn't believe that we could get a star that was getting $16 million a year at that time to do a $750 just a guest shot.
There you go. Very good. Demi Moore, my goodness. I remember when I think her first role was in Blame It on Rio, if anybody remembers that movie, with Joe Bologna, Michael Caine. My God, that was a lot of hard work for Michael, I got to tell you. He was on there with another young lady whose name escaped me. I think it was Michelle Johnson, and that was interesting. And of course, who knew later, G.I. Jane. So, and Bruce, now to get back to him, he came totally out of left field. It wasn't like he was one of these guys that was playing character roles for years and years and years. But, that show, I got to tell you, my memories of Moonlighting, you just like were on pins and needles waiting for the next episode. But because there were always, I'll call them problems, you probably know better, I'm sure you do, that you would wait 3 weeks to a month sometimes to see a new episode. And I mean, were the tensions really that bad on the show?
Well, was the situation. Sybil had new babies, and Bruce didn't want to work past lunch, so it worked out pretty good between them. I believe that a lot of that, I've never seen them argue. I've seen them get along very well. But the real truth of it was a 7-day show that it took us 14 days to shoot. And we had rotating first, we had rotating directors. So during those 14 days, we would push 5 or 6 meal penalties and end about 2:30, 3 o'clock every day. And that was all we would shoot. And people like Skip Bodine, a first assistant director, now a producer, used to love it because he used to run up to Colorado for 14 days and go skiing and then come back and jump right back in, and we do another show.
Oh.
We did 70, I do believe we did 76 shows total.
Wow, I'm amazed because, as I said, then ultimately the show went off the air. I thought rather too soon. But
ABC Picture Makers took it off the air. I asked them why they wouldn't do the extra, bring it up to 96 to make it into syndication.
Sure.
And they said, no, we just can't do it anymore.
Wow. All right. Well.
And I pushed for it because I really liked the show. Frankie Capp did the music for it from start to finish. I was partners with Frankie Capp when I opened up my own casting office, LA Casting. And first year we did $13 million in payroll, and from then on we started doing around 17 to 20 million. Frankie died last year on September 12th, and which is Carol and I's 55th anniversary.
There you go. Back to Barbara. Now, in this one, I'm sure everybody has something to chime in, but we'll start with Ms. Barbara because we actually have a photo of her with the chairman of the board, Frank Sinatra. My goodness. So did you have to genuflect when you approached Mr. Sinatra?
No, I had to kind of wheel my way into that, I'll tell you, because Frank Sinatra was a tough cookie. He hated the press. He especially hated ladies of the press. And so it was kind of challenging, especially because I was brand new at the National Enquirer when I got this assignment where that picture was taken. And the boss thought that I should go on this because he felt that a girl would have more chances of getting close to the chairman of the board than any of the male reporters would, which actually turned out to be true, because I had to masquerade as a fan, but by doing that, I was able to kind of infiltrate his entourage, and this was really the guys that he hung out with, and they were a ribald gang. Pat Henry was his opening comic on his act, and Pat was just, I mean, he was really just one ribald guy. But the other guys had names like Frankie Eyelashes, Charlie the Head.
Was Jilly Russo there at the time?
Oh, Jilly was very much present, yes. No, it was Jilly, it was not Jilly Russo, it was Jilly Rizzo.
Rizzo, thank you.
Yeah, Jilly Rizzo.
I could feel a leg being broken just as I misspoke the name. I could just, thank goodness I never met him in real life, my goodness.
Oh my God, I know, it's true. So anyway, he had this gang of guys, and I ended up going up in an elevator because I'd been tipped that Sinatra always had dinner in between his shows on top of the hotel where he was appearing, in the kind of the top restaurant way up on top up there. So I made a reservation. I was going up in the elevator, and I had been tipped that all of the guys in Sinatra's entourage wore these baby blue jackets, and they had kind of like a printing on the side that says such and such a tour. And so I saw this guy, this kind of very Italian-looking guy, a little short guy, with this baby blue jacket, and he started to look me up and down in the elevator. He said, "Hi, sweetheart," one of those. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going up to the restaurant." I said, "I'm hoping I get to meet Frank Sinatra. I'm just such a big fan." And he said, "Well, sweetheart, you're in luck, because guess what? I'm going up there to have dinner with Sinatra." Well, anyway, this turned out to be one of the biggest chapters in my new book. This guy was named Spider. That was his nickname. And I kind of got myself into the spider's web, so to speak, and through that met Sinatra and managed to get that interview with him as he was walking along, having just received an honorary degree. So anyway, it was amazing. Frank Sinatra was probably the most dynamic person that I ever met in my showbiz coverage. He was a kind of, I can't explain it other than to say that when he walked into a room, the energy changed in that room. It was like the air started to vibrate. Now, I don't know whether that was because he was so famous, or was he so famous because he did that. I'm not sure, but he had a total energy. He was the guy in charge. People just loved him, and he really just inspired that devotion amongst his followers. I don't know how much he paid those guys to go with him, but most of them were, had come out of Las Vegas. Frankie Eyelashes went back to his job after finishing up his tenure with Frank Sinatra. It was a croupier in Las Vegas. So the guys were partying hard, and through kind of wheedling my way into that group, and escaping at the very end without having to do the big payoff, which we knew would be expected, but that was not about to happen. That's a big chapter in my first book, and it's a lot of fun to read. It's a lot of fun even for me to read it again.
Now, Alexis, you write in your book, now Joy knew Frank and might have even dated him. Give us a little version of your story.
Well, she knew him intimately. Let's just put it that way. They dated for a few years. They were seen all over town, and they were pretty hot and heavy. The only problem, I asked Joy if she liked him, and she thought that he was a really nice guy, but he was very moody and very depressed because a friend of his had died, and so it affected him deeply, and so that kind of killed their relationship. But they were very, very much involved. In fact, Joy, as I speak in my book about silicone injections, she and Frank went together and had silicone injections. She had hers unfortunately in her breast, and as far as what I was told is he had it in his face, which ultimately caused, lumpiness later on in his career.
Would you say that, because the word I would use more, at least now that I have this little tidbit, more of like a puffiness?
Yeah, Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, puffiness and lumpy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, because the silicone is terrible. It's a terrible thing.
Yeah, wow. We got a scoop here. I didn't even know it. Robert, now, what about Frank? Any connections at all during that time?
I can assure you that no one ever called him puffy or lumpy.
I know, but not about his face anyway.
No, great entertainer. Never met him. I met Jilly a lot.
There you go, yeah. The one who'd be chasing me looking to pronounce his name correctly.
That's right.
Oh, my goodness. All right. We have got, I love doing these shows with these folks. Hollywood or Bust Part 2 with our friends Alexis Hunter, author, Joy Lansing, A Body to Die For. For more information, www.bearmanormedia.com. Barbara Sternig, author, journalist, www.barbarasternig.com, and Robert J. Teitelbaum, author, publisher. For more information on Robert and his books, www.frogsandsnailsandmobstertales.com. All right, let's see now. I was so engrossed in that, I lost my, Alexis' turn. I don't have a photo of this gentleman. I believe he just passed within the last couple of years. When you did that movie Bigfoot where you met Joy, it was quite a, we talked a little bit when you were on with me a couple of years ago, quite an interesting eclectic cast of characters. But one gentleman, if you had any stories to tell, was a guy named Jerry Marin. And he was one of the Munchkins, the lone surviving Munchkins from The Wizard of Oz, who lived to about 98 years old. You worked with him on that Bigfoot movie. Tell me, what did he do on that film?
He was one of the baby Bigfoot. Jerry Marin was a super, super nice guy. He and I sort of hung around together in between shots. I mean, such a cute little guy, and he was in a monkey suit just as I was. Because this was a Stinko B film, the costumes were not the finest, and we were both itching quite a bit because it was they were cheap. But he was a great guy, and we had a lot of laughs. It was a wonderful experience for me being on that film, meeting Joy and meeting Jerry, and it really meant a lot to me.
There are stories, and nobody here can corroborate them, that supposedly when they were filming The Wizard of Oz, there were quite a bit of hijinks because a lot of the little people, as they call them, I think Robert and I may have talked about this off air one time,
Yes.
apparently they were given their own hotel. I don't know if it was a little hotel, but anyway.
City Hotel.
It was for little people anyway. But, apparently they used to like to party hardy, and they really, you think Keith Moon used to ransack hotels. These guys had nothing on that, I gotta tell you. They were pretty rambunctious from what I heard.
You bet.
Robert summarized it in a few words. All right, there you go.
We did Under the Rainbow, which was a Chevy Chase movie, and of course all the Hollywood shorties worked for me. I had over 50 of them on Under the Rainbow, and I had to go over to the Culver City Hotel, the big brick building, and stop the rioting and the partying that was going on, or they were going to throw them out of the hotel, and they were going to have to live at my house.
So some 40 years
doing that, but the situation is every little person in Hollywood was signed up with me, and I used to give them a lot of jobs to stand in for children, and also anytime I could, because I had a different way of casting. If I was I didn't like the nondescript casting that a lot of companies used. I didn't like all the pretty people in one thing, because if you have a show of all pretty people, they get lost. So for every pretty person, I would put a plain person. For every tall person, I would put a short person. And I also put in 41% minority casting into Universal when all the shows were very, very lily white. I put in the casting, and it was a good thing for Universal and all the other studios in Hollywood.
I just love that some 40 years later, 42, 43 years later, some of that same bunch still were like raising hell in hotels from the Wizard of Oz to Under the Rainbow.
I forget, it was Mike Healy. I think it was Mike was on that show. He was causing grief with the little people, and it was very funny, actually. But they listened to me, and they knew that, when I told them that they had to stop this or we were going to get thrown out of the hotel, they quieted down quite a bit, but they never stopped partying.
There you go. Oh, my goodness. Studio 411 with our guests, Alexis Hunter, joining us from California, Barbara Sternick as well from the West Coast, and from Las Vegas, Robert J. Teitelbaum for the remainder of this hour. Barbara, when you were on with me a little while ago, we talked about Bob Crew, who, for those who don't remember, was a multi-talented producer. Someone the other day said, "Oh, he looks like Robert Redford." And I said, "Yeah, he really does." Was a dear friend of Barbara's, and I only ask because you talk about it in the book, so it's not like I'm kind of sandbagging you. You and he had a little bit of a fling for a time.
Yeah, well, at least we did for one night. Bob was Bob was one of my dearest friends, actually, at that time. Our apartments were very close together, and every evening, Bob Crew used to have like a salon, and all of these talented people would always come over to his apartment on La Cienega Boulevard and sit down at the piano and, just make music. And Bob, in case people don't really realize who he is or was, he's passed away quite recently, he was the creator of the Four Seasons. He was their producer. He made that Four Seasons sound happen. He produced all their records, but he was a very prolific songwriter as well. From his early days, when he was probably not even 20 years old yet, he wrote a song called Silhouettes that was a popular early rock and roll song, all the way up to Lady Marmalade. Kenny Nolan wrote Lady Marmalade, but his main claim to fame was as the Four Seasons producer. So anyway, Bob was such a creative person, and he was so handsome. Oh my God, he was this gorgeous blonde god, and everybody was in love with him. He was gay, but everybody was in love with him, men, women, everybody, including me. And when we'd go over to his apartment, those were the days in Hollywood. Maybe they still are, I don't know. But everybody was doing all these drugs, and there was a big bowl of cocaine on the table, and people would be disappearing in the kitchen and rolling, putting out these little lines of cocaine. And I just was never one to use any drugs, and I didn't want to, and I had to work the next day anyway. So every time I went there, they were always on like, "Oh, Babs, you're Hollywood Babs. Why don't you try this? You've never tried it. You at least have to." So I always demurred until finally one evening I just said to myself, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it this one time. I will take a sniff of this stuff of yours, and then will you be happy? Then will you leave me alone with all this peer pressure?" So they said, yeah. We just want you to. So anyway, I took a sniff of this stuff. And honestly, I didn't feel a thing. I really didn't feel anything at all. I had no effects that were discernible to me, not at all. So finally, the end of the evening rolls around, and we're all just kind of sitting around, and everybody starts to kind of go home. And I say, Bob, I got to go. I got to get up early for work. And he said, why don't you stay? I don't want you to go out because you had some stuff. And so I said, no, it's fine. He said, no, I don't want you to drive, even though it's only a few blocks. So he took me by the hand, and you have to read the chapter.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, Barbara converted Bob for one night. How's that for a synopsis, huh?
Oh my God.
Lady Marmalade, yeah, all that good stuff.
Oh. He was a doll. And we remained very close friends, even though we never had such an encounter again.
There you go. I know, but in looking back at that, he's absolutely right, because again, that would kind of be like someone who's had maybe a few too many drinks and then says, "I'm only a few blocks away." In this case, obviously, as it still is today, something like that could have cost you your job or whatever the case may be.
Oh, God, who knows what? Yeah.
So needless to say,
who knew that just protecting me from the police on the road would lead to that. But
he was a good friend, and he had a good eye for talent. So, oh my
He was a
goodness,
doll.
I'm telling you. Let's see now. Where was I? Ah, yes. Mr. Teitelbaum, yeah, a show that was, I guess, a miniseries back in the mid to late '80s. Not well received. We have a advertising still from a CBS miniseries called Fresno, which I remember with Carol Burnett and the lovely Terry Garr and Dabney Coleman, a whole bunch of people. And you, I guess, have some stories from that debacle.
Well, Bernie Ornizanski gave me the job from MTM. I was doing all the shows, including Remington Steele, Hill Street, St. Elsewhere, and any other show they were doing. They asked me if I would go out with Eddie Melkovich, producer, and also a first AD, to do Fresno, up in Fresno. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And it gets me out of town for a full week. They gave me a script, and I opened up the script, and the first page was missing. I said, what the hell, I'm going to give it to the mayor of Fresno. And I did. I went up there with Michael Haidt, and we were on the front pages of all the Fresno Bee. We were on the local television. We went to all the parties. I hired about 700 people, including the whole everybody, the mayor and this whole crew, the state senator. So this all went on, and after the show was over, all these people kept calling me to put them on shows. So I would stick people that I could. I put them on LA Law. I put them on, other shows, lots of other shows, and all of a sudden it's finally coming out. It's coming out in November, before Thanksgiving, and I'm there. And I always thought about that first page. And what happened was the movie opens up and it shows a conquistador with, maybe 50 of his soldiers walking behind the horse. And all of a sudden, Padres and their little groups come up and say, try our grapes. These are beautiful. And he goes, oh, yeah, this is nice. And then they all would come up, and another one, and then another one. And finally, a scraggly little group with a Padre comes up and says, please try our grapes. And he takes a bite, and he spits it out, and he says, this tastes like Fresno. That was the opening of the movie.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I stopped getting calls from Fresno. I had at least 80 or 100 people calling me on a daily basis from up there, and I always knew they would show up on time because they really wanted to be in the movies. And I was just giving them extra work. I wasn't giving them anything where they had to get lines or anything else. But they drove in from Fresno, and they would stay overnight, and they would do a good job and go home. And I had a lot of them working for a period of probably 5 or 6 months, and it all stopped. So I never went back to Fresno.
Wow. I think you
true story.
I think you could use Jerry Marin and his crew to liven that picture up. Let me tell you.
Well, Jerry Marin, I got an interesting side story. He came up to my wife when she was very, very young, and he patted her on the head, and she kicked him in the shin. But Jerry did work for me.
Say again? Billy Barty, yes.
He lived a long life, and when we did Under the Rainbow, there were only 13 of the original Little People left. And it was, that's the kind of thing that I like to do. I like to make shows look real. And when I did, even though it was a great comedy and funny, and I still was able to give these guys work.
Yep, that's great.
Absolutely. Now, Barbara, you mentioned Billy Barty. Did you know Billy?
Well, I met Billy many times just out and about in Hollywood, but I actually never interviewed him, but I just wondered because wasn't he in The Wizard of Oz, too? Wasn't he one of the premier little people?
not to my knowledge. No, he was in many things later on, but no.
Oh, yeah, and he really, really fought for the little people, too.
Amazing.
He was in Under the Rainbow. It was one of his last movies.
Yeah, he was in that
his
Chevy
line
Chase.
was, there was a plate of liver, and one of the ladies lost a pearl in the liver, and he kept saying that the pearl was in the liver, and the Japanese man that was there, who was a spy at the time, because this is supposed to be taken back before World War I or World War II, kept going, "The pearl is in the river."
River.
And that was the code name, and it was a funny movie. Chevy Chase did it, and it was a good movie.
For those of you of the Japanese persuasion, frogs and snails and mobstertales.com. No. I do have a question because I'm blanking. I don't know if it was Carrie Fisher. Who was Chevy's co-star in that movie?
I don't remember Carrie being in that. I did Postcards from the Edge, and she wrote that. And it was quite a good movie. That's how I met Mike Nichols. He called me. His people called me and said that Helen Mathis couldn't meet him for lunch, and asked me if I could go to lunch with him. So I did. And from that, I got 5 movies, including Regarding Henry and Postcards from the Edge. That was also Annette Bening's first movie. But it was a beautiful movie. It's one of the movies that I'm most proud of. And it was very, very good. I can still hear Meryl Streep singing. The last song in the picture was called I'm Checking Out of This Heartbreak Hotel.
There you go. Oh, Studio 411, we're doing another episode of Hollywood or Bust, take 2 or part 2, whichever you'd like, with our guest Alexis Hunter joining us via phone, Barbara Sternig also joining us, and via satellite from Las Vegas, Robert J. Teitelbaum. And let's see, in our remaining couple of moments, Barbara, tell us a little Sid Caesar story in the few minutes we have left. You knew Sid?
I only met Sid. I used to have lunch quite often at the Friars Club. He was a fixture there. He was and you know what? These were the old-timey stars. These guys were so friendly, and they just never, ever put anybody off. At the Friars Club, of course, this was sort of the big old fraternity where all the old comics and even vaudeville people would always have lunch every day. But Sid was that way with all of his fans. What a genius. And I think that he was a pioneer that possibly isn't quite as recognized as he ought to be. From the very early times of television, Your Show of Shows, he and Imogene Coca did this. They just really made television come into people's homes on a weekly basis. But I never did meet him. I mean, I never did know him. I met him only because of the Friars Club. But if you'd go up to him, he would be so delighted that you did that. And you really felt that it was genuine too. He enjoyed meeting the people whom he had made happy.
Let's see now, Alexis, you knew Sid Caesar or no?
Yes, I did. In fact, when I met Joy doing Bigfoot, she was having an affair with Sid.
Uh-huh.
And, yeah, they had this hot affair going, and she took me to meet him in his office, and he was a dynamite guy. Really, really, really nice. He had a few issues, but in general, just a super, super, super person. He had something in common with Joy. They both had problems with sleeping pills. He had problems with a drug called Miltown, and Joy with Seconal. So that was their commonality, and they both liked each other a lot.
A question.
Interesting, very interesting.
I know, yeah. It's amazing how these stories kind of all, bob and weave from, like you said, Barbara, in the beginning, people may not know each other, but people they've known or whatever, the stories, it's kind of like, what was that game, Kevin Bacon, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, somebody knows somebody from somewhere, somehow, it's amazing.
And the other thing about Sid Caesar that's so amazing is he gathered that team of writers, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, Neil Simon. These people went on to have amazing careers of their own because these were just really, really talented people. That's the kind of people with whom he surrounded himself.
One last thing in the remaining moments we have, and I thought of this, and I said, let me ask these folks who I consider experts. I'm sure you never knew the man, way before most of your times. George Reeves, who played Superman, and of course there was a movie later made of, called Hollywoodland, which I'm sure kind of struck a nerve, perhaps in terms of the beloved Hollywood. We'll start with Alexis. Do you think that George committed suicide or was he murdered?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I wish I knew. I heard he had demons that he dealt with, but I really don't know. I don't know.
He was also dating someone who had some mob connections too. So apparently
that could be a problem.
Yes, indeed.
That could definitely be a problem.
Yeah.
If you want to know about Superman, there's a guy by the name of Jim Knoll who is an absolute expert on George Reeves.
There you go.
I'll have you to speak with him.
Absolutely. Barbara.
Does anybody remember that George Reeves was in Gone with the Wind?
Yes, yes, he was.
Remember that? He played one of the twins that was hovering around Scarlett in one of the opening scenes. Yeah. I don't know anything about George Reeves except I used to watch him on TV when I was a little kid.
No, but I was just curious, in all your years in Hollywood, you never heard whether there was some, truth to whether, he did kill himself or whether there was some foul play.
I never heard, except
Wow.
I felt bad. How could Superman die?
I know. And what about you, Robert? Any inside information?
No, I know nothing about George Reeves. I do know one thing for sure, that Sid Caesar hanged Mel Brooks out a window, a 10-story window by his feet one
right.
night.
Oh, really?
And anybody can do that to Brooks as a hero in my book. I did Spaceballs for Mel.
Oh, and was Sid in that movie?
No, he wasn't in the movie. Sid was a great improviser, and he was a perfectionist to the end.
He was a very strong guy too. People forget that
strongest guy in Hollywood.
When he did your show of shows, which I assume was out of New York, that he looked almost a little overweight, but really that was a lot of muscle. And even I go back to when he was in Grease and Grease 2. He played one of the athletic coaches.
The coach.
And which was kind of really a minor role, but still people remember him fondly, him and Eve Arden and several others. But again, a guy that even in his later years, he was a fitness kind of guy, and I can see him taking on Mel Brooks for sure.
All he did was hang him out the window because Mel disagreed with him.
Anyone else know of anybody hung out to dry or no?
Too many.
Too many, yes, indeed, I'll say. All right, well, we love getting these folks together because I know that Robert and Alexis had joined us the last time, and Barbara, of course, loved having her because of all her years working with the National Enquirer. Joy Lansing, A Body to Die For, A Love Story. Website, www.bearmanormedia.com. Barbara Sternig, Celebrity Secrets of a National Enquirer Reporter. Further adventures on the Hollywood beat. And her website is simple, www.barbarasterning.com. And also Robert J. Teitelbaum, author, publisher, the most recent book of his, Hiding in Plain Sight, A Personal Window into Organized Crime. Frogs and Snails and MobsterTales.com for more information. We'll start with Alexis. Alexis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Larry. It's always a pleasure, and your other guests are amazing.
We're going to hang them out a window as soon as this show is over. So
Absolutely,
take care of
absolutely.
that. Barbara, thank you for sharing some personal anecdotes, and stay from behind that wheel.
Oh, thank you so much, Larry. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and love being on with Alexis and Robert.
And Robert, play some numbers. I'm not sure, but have a good time.
I'm actually going to catch an airplane in about 20 minutes.
There you go. All right. Well, you guys hang on for a brief second. We thank you for joining us here on this episode of Studio 411, Hollywood or Bust Part 2. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.